Welcome to another episode of Movement by Design. In this episode, I'll be tying the Conflict Perch. This is the first of 5 flies in the Conflict style that I'll be sharing with you. So basically the Conflict model is aiming to slow the top half of the fly before the bottom half. This conflict between drag and momentum is where the walk the dog or side to side cadence to the fly is achieved. I like to call it momentum movement. So this is the perch pattern. I've got a Matzuo 4/0 in the vise, and I've also got a 1/4 inch tungsten cone threaded there. The thread I'm using is a Nano Silk 3/0. Just going to start that in the middle of the shank and wind it over. To the other side so it hangs around in between the hook point and the barb, anywhere around there. I'm going to grab some faux bucktail in the chartreuse. I'm going to cut about 1/4 of a pencil thickness, which is probably about 60 fibres, and we're just going to offer that up to the hook, and I'm looking for about 1 hook length and 1/4 long. Just pinch that on top of the hook shank there. And some pinching it in position, some nice turns. We're going to come down about 1/4 inch, then go back up. So right at the bend there. At this point, we'll just snip the butt ends of the faux bucktail off and just soak a little bit of head cement into the butt ends there. Well, as usual, it's blocked. I'll just unblock that. A few drops in there, make it nice and snug. With this particular hook, you can actually use bucktail for this step. In the smaller sizes, the faux bucktail is definitely the way to go. But on this pattern, you can use the bucktail. And when I was developing this fly, that's what I used to use. Just use the stiffer fibers, not the hollow ones that want to flare out when you tie them. Next step, we're just going to add some flash. This is the Polar Flash Opal Mirage, and I've probably got about 8 strands there. And all I'm going to do is fold it in half over the top of the butt ends there, and then just lock it in position so we've got the fibres either side of the faux bucktail. Just return your thread to the bottom of there, and I'm just going to snip those off at a slight taper so they're about the same length or a little bit longer than the faux bucktail. Now I'm going to grab a neck cape. Use this one, and I'm going to grab four nice straight feathers out of the middle of the cape, and we're going to pair them off. Just get 2, pair them off, get the tips even. Then I'm just going to rip some, expose the stem at the rear of the hackle, and I'll just grab that with a couple of some medium tight turns, and then I'm just going to pull it so the fibres get sucked into the thread, and I want the tips just a little bit longer than the faux bucktail. When I'm happy with that, I'm still pinching it, and I'm going to lock it in with some really nice tight turns. I'll cut the butt ends off there, and we'll do the same on the other side. I'll give you a bit of a look here in a minute. Again, we'll just get a few turns over the exposed stalk, then just drag it until the tips are level with the hackle on the other side. When you're happy, wind that down nice and tight, and I'm going to snip the buttons off there too. So for this little bit of exposed thread, I'm going to put on a dub a little bit of orange ice dub on the thread. So let's go ahead and we want probably an inch of dubbing. Before I wind that on, I'll add a little bit of head cement on it just so it's super secure. Just unblock it again. Give that a good soaking of head cement. And we'll just dub add a little bit more. There we go. Then just wind your thread up onto the shank. We'll do like a half-inch turn there, or a quick whip finish, so we can flip the cone onto the other side. We're going to turn our fly so hook point up. We'll push that cone back tight and just restart our thread. And wind it back tight against the cone. At this point, I'll just move the camera out a bit and let's just have a quick look at what we've got so far. And you can see that we've got a nice open V formed with the hook shank and the tail. And basically this is the conflict model right here. No matter what fly we're going to tie in the next few episodes, you'll always notice at this point the tail and the shank of the hook will form a V. This helps separate the drag of the fly and the weight of the fly, which is the momentum of the fly. And as I said before, the rocking action as this fly slows down is where it gets the side to side at. So what we're going to do next, we're going to tie in a little bit more drag, and it's going to be above the cone. And for drag, I'm going to use some chartreuse sculpting fiber. You can also use EP fiber, the 3D EP fiber. So I've pinched about a quarter of a pencil. So I'm just going to get the sculpting fiber. I'm going to place it on top of the hook shank there, so it's on the inside bend. And we can trim it to length, but I've got one side so it's just short of the tips, and that's where we're going to trim this other end. I'm just going to take it over the top of the fly and have a look. I'm just going to cut that off at an angle so it's just shy of the tips of the hackle. I'm going to place that both ends of the material through the hook point, so we've got all the fibers on the middle, and I'll just catch that in and wind it tight against the cone, just like so. Okay, just leave those up there for the time being. So next step, we're going to add some cross-cut rabbit, and so just with the hide facing out and the hair going back, we're going to wind the thread and get a quick half hitch right at the point where the shank jots up at 90 degrees. Just add a drop of head cement on the shank there, and with touching turns we're going to wind the cross cut up to the thread to where the shank jots up at 90 degrees. It's a little bit awkward to tie that. If you get a couple of nice tight turns and then snip the excess off. And secure that nice and tight. So nice tight turns, just like that. And next we're going to put some dubbing over the top of that thread. I'm going to use some ice dub red, UV red. So just dub about 1 inch or so of thread, and we're just going to wrap the dubbing around that post and finish the thread right up at the eye, just like so. At this point I'll just take the hook out of the vise and we'll just tease that sculpting fibre back, and I'll place the hook back in the vise like so. The next step we're going to do, we're going to add a wing, and I'm going to use an olive bucktail. So you just get a clump of bucktail. Just going to pinch that in the 2/3 and just pull all the shorter fibres out. So we end up with something like that, and I'm going to offer it on top of the fly there, and I'm looking for lengthwise. I want about a hook length and a half long. So that's about good where we are. I'll just pinch that in the other hand, snip it off straight. Now there's not a lot of room on this hook to tie the bucktail, so we have to be a little careful. So we'll just offer that up to the hook shank. I'm going to pull the thread so it's pointing up, and I'm just going to stick the butt ends into that, so I've got about half the material in the first turn, and then the next turn I'll grab the rest of the material, just pinching it to stop it from rolling over onto the sides there, and that looks pretty good. So keep pinching it and then get some nice tight turns on it, just like so. That's perfect, and we'll finish off with a whip finish, and one more for good measure. That's one good thing about this nano silk. It doesn't matter how many turns you do in a whip finish, it will always slip through. Okay. At this point, we'll soak in a little bit of head cement. get a good coverage. So it's nice and secure. The next is to put the eyes on, and we've got two options. Let's just have a look. So one option is we can use some, I think they're about 10 mil these eyes, but you want nice big ones so it covers the both the shank and the little bit of a bend there of the hook, so it's really secure. That's one option, and the other option is, the options that we're going to do today is we can use a fish skull, and I think the fly actually swims a little better if you use that. So I'm going to use the fish skull fish mask number 6. I think it finishes off the fly really nicely. But we have to do one little thing to modify the head so it sticks up, so it works properly. This is straight out of the packet, so if you notice, it doesn't go all the way on because it's hitting that little shank of the hook there. So what we need to do, we just get a razor blade. I'll just see if I can show you. And I'm just going to notch a little bit of a V out on one side. It actually doesn't take much, that's all it takes. So I've just cut a V. And we'll just put that on to make sure that I've got enough. That's actually perfect. See how now the hook eye is nice and clean and clear. And it's going to push our bucktail down just that little bit, like that. That's exactly what we need there. I like it. So I'll put it back in the vise. Just take our fish skull off. Before I glue that on, I'm just going to get my little brush here, and I'm just going to tease those gills out a little bit. And I'll grab some goop. Okay, we'll just move the camera in a little bit. I'm just going to put a bit of goop right on the side there. Flip the fly over. Do the same again. Make sure a little bit's on top. Okay, that should be enough. Now take our fish skull with the V facing down, place that over the just make sure it's nice and snug there. Okay. That's pretty good. I'll just reposition our fly so we can get a look at the whole thing. One thing, I've already stuck the eyes in. It doesn't come in with eyes, but it takes 6 mil 3D eyes, or you can put flat eyes in there too if you want to. But I think that finishes off the fly really nicely. So I'll just change the position. I'll just trim the back of that sculpting fibre a little bit. But I like to leave that there until I field test the fly, because I might need to trim it a little bit more off. And once it gets wet, it'll settle down a little bit. Okay, so that is the Conflict Perch. We can do the exact same steps we did and make a shad pattern, just a white and grey, or any colour that you. So when we go to fish this, we're going to use a loop knot, which will make the fly move a lot easier. I've caught lots of largemouth bass and even some smallmouth bass on this fly, especially if you're fishing water that's a little dirty. This is a great pattern because it moves so much water when you pull it through in the side-on position. That's one good thing about these flies. They do push a lot of water for their size. As I said before, the conflict model is to keep most of the drag above the weight or the keel of the fly, and you can see this hook naturally does that. We got our tungsten cone right at the bottom, and we got most of the actual body profile is above it. This changes, of course, when we change hooks, but that'll be a thing that I can explain as we go. So that's the Conflict Perch. I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to give it, at the end of the video, I'll just show a quick clip of it swimming in my bathtub so you can get an idea of what you're shooting.